Now, did I
Mm.
like running? No. But you're made to run 5 miles at a slow pace when it's on payday and you have a brigade running. And that is a very painful because you might as well just walk as slow as it was. But when you think about it, it would have been probably stuck it out. Who cares if they lost the paperwork? Redo it again. Your dad taught you, hey, make sure
Hmm.
three things that you're doing. Get three copies of whatever you're doing because military has a way of losing things. Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgens. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. All right, welcome back to Coach So. And for the very first time, Kenya begins to be in my seat and I'll be in the hot seat this go around. We're celebrating veterans and Veterans
Mm.
Day for the month of November. So this would be a two-part series. This would be the first series prior to Veterans Day. And then we'll have a part two after Veterans Day, because I do feel like I'm biased for us veterans that we need to celebrate the sacrifices that our men and women have served to this country. So, Kenya, thank you for doing this for us. And so you have the hot seat.
I am so excited to be hosting this gathering of the winners of the servant heart. If we're not here to love and to serve, I don't know what we're here for. So thank you in behalf of America and internationally speaking. I am America at heart, but really born from Brazil. And I came to understand that freedom does not come free at all. And I know it's a saying that many people say it to say. However, in 2025, being a mother of two boys and a girl and teenagers, I know that I raised them to go after their dreams and be towards God's service. I don't know what's in there for them, but it might be military. I don't know. So, how wonderful is to experience you guys today in the other side having served. So, I would like to start by asking for each one of you introduce yourself and please tell me which branch of service and how long you served.
So my name is Georgia Lee Arts. I retired as an E7. I couldn't promote due to medical issues,
Mm.
but I was also a dual status. So I was also a GS11 civil servant military technician for part of that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
My name is Jerry Ryan, and I was in the U.S. Army from 1976 to 1980. I worked at Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. Was there for 4 years.
Wow. And then, of course, our beloved Steve.
And, it's amazing to serve in the military. I wasn't expecting to be in the military. And I did 4 years active duty Army at Fort Hood, Texas, what we call the armpit of Texas, because it just really stinks down there sometimes. The other 4 years was reserves in the Criminal Investigations Department here in Bartlesville when I moved to Tulsa area in 96.
Amazing. So the following question is open mic. Are you a military brat?
I am.
I'm also a brat.
Jerry?
No, I'm not a military brat. I'm a federal government brat. My dad worked for the federal government, and I went to 11 schools in 12 years. He moved all the time
Wow.
because he was in data processing back in the 70s when the computers would have filled an airplane.
Hmm.
So I get the whole involvement of moving with the
Mm.
job and stuff, just like military brat.
For our listeners, one of the things that we want to clarify about military brat is the fact that is a pride term for us military children that grew up with parents who were in the military. And so my father did 26 years in the Air Force. And so probably proud of him and his service. Georgia, was it your father, your mother who served?
My father, and I have another line of relatives before him who also served on different sides of my family. My father's a Vietnam veteran and he retired from the Wisconsin Military Academy.
Wow. So, what was behind your choice of branch? What made you choose that, Georgia?
So, in choosing the Air Force, part of it was that, well, I wanted to fly and I visited all of the recruiters. And, I was young and I was working in this office, which was boring. And I kind of knew what I wanted. And the only recruiter that promised me anything even remotely exciting was the Air Force recruiter. And so I was able to go in with what they call a guaranteed job reservation. So I enlisted into AWACS to fly with AWACS doing air surveillance. And they didn't disappoint me. It was not boring at all.
How exciting. How about you, Jerry?
Well, for me, my choice was to go into the Army. I had a lot of my relatives that were in different branches. My grandfather was in World War II and was in Iwo Jima and all these places in the Marine Corps. My uncles, one was in the Air Force and one was in the Army. So it's kind of like my mom's side of the family had all this military background. Um, and I just chose the Army because I really didn't want to be a Marine. I'm sad to say, I just didn't want to do that. Uh, I'm not a good swimmer, so the Navy was out. Just reasons like that. Um, so yeah, that's why I chose the Army.
What about you, Steve?
Dad being served in the Air Force for 26 years, we traveled a lot. His brother served in Vietnam and won't talk about it. He was in the Marine Corps, drafted in. My mom's brother was Navy officer. And so we've kind of hit almost any branch within our family. Because of how I grew up moving around, I did not want that for my family. But because of circumstances in the 90s, I went in right when the Gulf War was starting to come to a close. And so I went into the military, to the Army, because the Army was the only one that says, hey, we'll pay back your student loans. And so I had private college student loans and I took it. And it was a blessing to have those paid off in 4 years.
Were you enlisted or officer?
I was enlisted. I was expected to go to green to gold, but they lost the paperwork. So I said, forget it. I'll try warrant officer school. And by this time, I've decided, you know what? I've had enough of I'll put it politely, stupidity sometimes of how we try to do things in the military. When you're in telecommunications, you have an officer that thinks that you can put a 30-meter mast on the top of a hill and still reach somebody below the hill, and you can't do it that way. And so I was shocked that a corporal didn't get a punishment for not following orders, and we followed the corporal instead of the lieutenant. And so sometimes these things kind of make you wonder, and that's why I didn't want to stay. And I just stayed as an enlisted and got out and just served it that way.
What about you, George? Enlisted?
I was enlisted as well.
About you, Jerry?
Also enlisted. I got the Specialist 4, which is a whole different thing. It's kind of like above a corporal. They got all kinds of different rankings now. And they pretty much froze promotions at that point. I couldn't get a promotion. And so it was part of what Steve was talking about how the system doesn't work very well, which is also why I chose not to re-enlist. It was just, Steve put it very well. The way they go about things is like you get promoted just because you stay there, not because you have the ability to do the job.
Interesting.
And that kind of really didn't set well with me. So, yeah.
What was life like in the military for you, Jerry?
Well, like I was just saying, I didn't agree with the way things were put out as far as who was leading who. I really enjoyed all the education stuff. I went to Fort Sam Houston down in Texas because that's where all the medical training was at that point for the entire, I think for all of the armed forces at one point. There was an academy there. And then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for some on the job training stuff. And then I ended up at Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. And it was all in the operating room. I chose to be called a 91 Delta MOS. And that was like an occupational specialty rating kind of a thing that you got to pick. And I guess I liked that part of it. I didn't like the way the hierarchy went. If the person in charge of me couldn't even spell what he wanted me to do, I have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, at that time, this was the 70s that I was in, and it was kind of a lot of people got in to avoid going to jail. There was it was a whole different group, and it was still during the draft. So it was a lot more broad spectrum of people than it is now. And that led to issues as well. It was big, almost a party atmosphere at that point.
Well, thank you. What about you, Georgia? How was military life for you?
I didn't know totally what to expect going in, and there were some definite shocks. It's like, wow, what did I just agree to do? But I never turned back because they gave me so much more than I could have gotten, I think, anywhere else. I built confidence that I've never had to begin with. And I think the structure was good. I learned a lot about resilience, leadership, working on a team, learning how to function under some pretty intense pressure when you have like an uncertain environment that's, mission driven, it's fast paced, you have minimal sleep and you have to just keep going. But I think too, a critical thing I learned was teamwork. And it's something that I miss. I don't know that I see that in the private sector, or maybe I just haven't been in the right spots. But knowing in some of the work I've done, you have to have trust in the team that you're working with. And you build an interesting bond that you really don't find in other places too when you do that. I've been challenged in the private sector because I don't see the same cohesiveness. It's everybody's kind of for themselves, maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Steve, how was military life?
Oh, man, it was an eye-opener. You hear my dad, he was security police. I had fun watching him as a kid at Lackland Air Force Base, training the guard dogs in theaters, when he would hide bombs or drugs or things and stuff. So, that was fascinating. So when I joined, I went in January in 1992, and you go to Fort Jackson. I don't like the beach. And you go to Fort Jackson and it's sand. And it's like they want you to clean your weapons, your gear. And I'm sorry, sand is like glitter. It's like a gift of life that won't go away. And so that was basic training. Then we bussed us over to Fort Gordon, Georgia, where I did telecommunications technology. This is 5G back then.
Wow.
The Gulf War had the 5G networking that they were doing. They were testing the technology that bridged the Air Force, the Marine, the Navy, all of it together in secure messaging. And with my team, I was a remote RAW operator. In other words, the 5G network you see today, the telephone poles that look like a cacti, the cactail at ponds, you can break them and they spread everywhere. That pole is a 5G network, is what we had back in the day. And we would provide telecommunications to the outlying, the war front. And we would move when they would move. But at the same time, we have what we call a switch, which takes the telecommunications and broadcasts it to the different personnel. But I was able to cross-train. I did a lot of different things as far as setting up the antennas, making sure the azimuths were shot correctly so we can have it. And you're stuck in this little box. because you got to make sure the radios are there. And that is where I did not realize, but I contracted cancer due to high radio frequency, the 5G network, and then the overexposure of diesel fluid that I had at Fort Irwin, which is a training center for the Army before we go to war. So when I first got in, I got out of Fort Gordon, moved to Fort Hood, immediately went to Fort Polk for training, Fort Polk to California, and then we were ramping up our equipment to go to Saudi Arabia. And fortunately, at that time, our captain was pregnant, and the senator excused us from duty because she was pregnant. So I didn't get to go to war. I supported it, but we didn't go.
Beautiful and sad. The word that comes to my mind is what price you paid, Steve. That was a price you paid. Thank you for that. Georgia, I'm going to blend a few questions in one. Did you see your support combat? And what would you say to your younger self when you first enlisted, if you could go back and tell something to her?
You have no idea what you just signed up for. You're going to be tested beyond your wildest imagination, and that was totally true. But you're going to find out what your limits are, and you're going to push them and expand them, and you're going to keep going. So I'm a Gulf War veteran. To get into the line of work I do, I had to go through SEER, survival school. So survival, evasion, resistance, escape from a prisoner of war camp. That was really intense. But I think I forgot the second part of the question, if I saw or supported combat. And so I'm a Gulf War veteran. So I flew with AWACS in the second part of Desert Storm. I received an Aerial Achievement Medal for the deep look surveillance that I performed when I was there. And while I didn't see direct combat on the ground, some of the things that did happen was one of our air crews was involved in the Black Hawk helicopter shoot down back in the 90s. It became an international incident. So many lives were lost from multi-nations. And then one of our AWACS crews crashed in Alaska. There weren't any survivors. And it was because their plane ingested a flock of migrating birds after takeoff.
Wow.
So those are the things that stick with you throughout your career. And it's a reminder that the things that we do, the work we do is critical, and we need a high degree of empathy and taking care of people and a regard for people. And things can happen in an instant in some jobs, so that, attention to detail is so critical.
Thank you for that. Before I go to Jerry, I'm just curious. You being a woman, was that a difference on treatment or places that you would go versus men, or military is like, it's just the same?
Thank you for that question. So going to Saudi Arabia, you have a small town girl who grew up in Wisconsin, and I really knew nothing when I joined the service. And all of a sudden you find yourself in this exotic location, and going to like downtown Riyadh, I would have to dress like the Arabic women. So in an abaya and a veil, so the black coverings that you see. And so I didn't view it as necessarily being restricted. I was more curious than anything. But if you had your hair uncovered, the religious police would come with their stick, and they will not approach a woman, but the men in your group, because you can't be alone, they will whack them on the leg with a stick and say, cover your hair, cover your hair. And if they had like music stores, the women weren't allowed to go in those. And if we were trying to eat somewhere in Riyadh, because we're not a family, we're just this mismatch of people, right? They made us sit in the back of the restaurant away from everybody else. So wow. It was definitely an experience. And they had a stoning when I was there. We were forbidden to go to it, but other countries do things differently. And I think women here don't realize how good we have it.
Hmm.
and they want this perfect state. And I think we have it so good. If they've been in some of the places that I've been, they
Wow.
would gain a whole different, unique perspective.
Thank you for that, Georgia. Jerry, what would you say to your younger self if you could, right before you enlisted?
I think looking back on it, I would just tell myself to take advantage of all the free stuff that there is going to be coming your way, free educational things. Um, there was a lot of that I didn't take advantage of. I could have, like when I was up for reenlistment, I wanted out so bad that they offered me a chance to go to the West Point Preparatory School and then to West Point.
Hmm.
I could have also gone to nursing school. I could have had my pick of anything there, but I chose not to because I didn't like the structure. And also, I would have had to stay. I would have had to stay single, and I was already engaged at that point. And it would have meant like putting the wedding off for, I think, 6 years, and another 12-year commitment to the military. And I just couldn't see that part. So I would say take all the free stuff you can while you're in, because they were offering things like hospital management courses, things like that, that would have been beneficial. But I was 19. I was in party mode. You know, I should have told my 19-year-old self,
Hmm.
get the good stuff, because the party can always continue later. I think that's the
Isn't
big
that
thing.
beautiful that he didn't have the maturity though? He was in the
Oh,
moment.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of how that whole time of my life was. We were all a bunch of teenagers in early 20s, and we were partying. First time away from home for
Mm.
most of us. That's
Did you
kind of
have a
how it
chance to
was.
participate in combat or support?
No, no. Basically, I got in right after Vietnam finished, and I thought, okay, this is the perfect time. Surely they're not going to start anything else for 4 years. And while I was in basic training, the hostages in Iran got taken from the embassy. And so that was another 4 years of things in the background, and everybody's leaves were canceled, all kinds of stuff like that. So it was on high alert when I thought it was going to be okay. Basically, what we were doing at Walter Reed was still patching up people from Vietnam, still doing work with them.
Wow. Thank you for that. Steve, the same
Yeah.
question for you. What would you say to little Steve?
You know, when I look back, I made the choice simply because it was a choice of survival.
Hmm.
And the choice of survival was because I was doing youth ministry at the time. One thought that ministry at that time, working with children, was my cup of tea. And I found out fairly quickly that it wasn't. So I wanted to do something to, okay, what do I do to pay back the loans? Because back in the 90s, it was a little tough to get jobs because of the economy situation. But if I was to say anything, would have been maybe stick it out a little longer.
Hmm.
You know, try to take advantage of trying to stick with re-putting your information back in to be an officer. I love the military. Just something about the frequency of music when we did cadence when we ran. Now, did I
Hmm.
like running? No. You know, but you're made to run 5 miles at a slow pace when it's on payday and you have a brigade running. And that is a very painful because you might as well just walk as slow as it was. But when you think about it, it would have been probably stuck it out. Who cares if they lost the paperwork? Redo it again. Your dad taught you, hey, make sure
Mm-hmm.
three things that you're doing. Get 3 copies of whatever you're doing because military has a way of losing things. And I was very fortunate that my dad told me to check out your records before you leave. You know, as a dependent and then as a military, I took my records because
Mm-hmm.
I knew what would happen. And unfortunately, like my friend who has 34 different types of ailments, they conveniently lost this Marine's records
Mm-hmm.
because of the situation that he's in. Kenya, I do appreciate this segment of you hosting. We're out of that time to where we're going to begin a part 2 series.
We'll continue.
Would you like to close it out for us?
Yes. It has been a pleasure to get to know Jerry and Georgia a little bit more, and Steve a little bit deeper today. Tune in for next week, where we continue celebrating the men and women that serve our country so beautifully. Thank you for your services, and I see you next week.
Take care, and God bless. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.